It's 7 p.m. on Tuesday, January 16th, 2024, and I will call this regular City Council meeting to order. I do want to thank everyone for joining us this evening, and if Councilmember Strader would lead us in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the record, all council is here this evening. We also have Director Madden, Manager Stallnecker, Chief Hernandez, our City Clerk Tricia Summers, Finance Director Simpson, and then we also have joining us this evening Sergeant Champagne. Moving on to citizen participation, the purpose of the public comment period at this meeting is for those wishing to address council on any matter. It is not intended for debate and discussion with the public. Please state your name and address for the record, and we kindly remind you to limit your comments to 3 minutes. We have one person signed up this evening, Jackie Strader. Oh, no, you didn't. I misread it. So we have no one signed up this evening. Additions and deletions. Any additions or deletions from tonight's agenda? Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda, which starts on page 3 of your packet. I do need a motion to pass. Councilmember Cedar?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Cedar and seconded by Councilmember Strader to pass the consent agenda as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried 7-0. The next item we have on the docket is the public hearing for the Milton Municipal Code Title 17.5. I'm going to have Planning Manager Stallnecker do a brief presentation of this, and then following the presentation, we will hold the public hearing, and then following that, we will have a discussion with council after another in-depth presentation by Planning Manager Stallnecker.
Good evening, and thank you, Mayor and Council. So yes, so tonight we'll be discussing, and this is considered the first reading of amendments to Chapter 1750 of the Milton Municipal Code pertaining to sign code regulations. The sign code was updated in 2018, but that update mainly focused on addressing the Supreme Court case at the time. That was Reed versus Town of Gilbert, which required sign codes to be content neutral. So that was sort of the focus of that update. With this proposal, the staff had some concerns and some ideas of parts that they felt we could look at to make it address some of the concerns that had been raised or enforcement issues. And as the Planning Commission began to dig into it a little more, they also found some ways that they felt that it would more reflect the current vision and feel of the city of Milton. And so it is a much more broader and comprehensive update than we originally planned, but hopefully you will find it really a positive. And again, we were looking at improving understanding and enforceability as well. There have been some wording changes made by the city attorney from the last update the Planning Commission saw, but nothing that changed the intent, more just some of the wording that he felt from his legal background made more sense. Some of the most, I'm just going to kind of highlight some of what I feel are maybe the more impactful changes, which is sort of eliminating pole signs and just moving to completely monument signs, requiring or allowing basically an adjacent property owner to determine if a temporary or portable sign in the right-of-way can be in front of their property. This is especially important during political season. People should have the right to say which political signs are in front of their property because people assume they're theirs, as well as if someone wanted to put up a sign for Little League or whatever, but they like to keep it nice and, the landscaping nice, it gives them the authority there. It added a section for accessory signs. Those were sort of, and again, we'll get in more depth with this on the second half of our agenda tonight. But those are sort of interior commercial signs. We added some design criteria for monument signs. Did some changing of how we categorize and how we figure signs. We divided portable signs into 2 categories, and we divided temporary signs into 2 categories, which all help with enforcement and understanding, and there's differences from those. And then specifically, we are prohibiting, the proposal is to prohibit signs from traffic islands. So that would be the new right-of-way. It would also mean the area, the island that's like kind of in front of Cannon Construction, that it would just allow no signs there at all. And again, we'll get into some more of that. Originally, the hope was to have been on the last study session, but the attorney and I had some issues. We were trying to kind of fine tune some of the stuff, and we just, between holidays and schedules, we didn't get to that, so we apologize. So the plan is tonight is to hold the public hearing for any comments, and then we will come back to it and go through the more detailed agenda summary that I have and open it up for discussion. If by some reason council is totally in love with everything, totally understands everything, it could be on the agenda in the next meeting in February. I would anticipate you guys are going to want to process it. It's a lot of information. I understand that. And so we can just carry it on to the first meeting in February for more discussion and more thoughts. And then again, there's no deadline on when there's nothing that's pressuring us to have this adopted right of way, so we can kind of move it into February. And also just a reminder that because it's a legislative issue and because it will be on for action later, you guys usually take testimony from on action items. So even though there's public hearing tonight, your standard procedure is to always take comment again. So that opportunity would be available after when it's on for the agenda item, when it's on for action. So at that point, I'm going to stop. We're going to do the public hearing, and then we'll go back into more depth.
Okay. So I will now open the public hearing at 7:07 p.m. to take public comment on the proposed change to Milton Municipal Title 17.5 regarding signs. We did have Jackie Strader sign up, so if you could come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Okay. Jackie Strader, 13th Avenue. So just to make it clear, I do not have an issue with regulating commercial signs, signs in the right-of-way. What I do have an issue with is regulating what Milton defines as yard signs and placing them in the temporary sign category when the definition of a yard sign is a sign that is a small sign placed in the yard that faces a street in order to show support or share a message with the public. It cannot exceed 24 by 36 inches, that seems fair, and are allowed in all residential zones for not more than 180 days in a calendar year. I have a problem with them being considered temporary when it is a support or sharing a message that may be a message or that I completely agree with. Like, according to my understanding of the code, if I put this sign in my yard, I would be limited to 180 days because that is the limit. I guess what I could do to exceed it is make 2 signs with a different font or different background to work around it. And then if Milton decides, okay, well, they got around that one, so now we'll make it 90 days or 30 days, or it's just, why is there a limit on residential content? Like, I'm expressing an opinion sign when other cities, I looked for other cities that do this. I'm sure they must be out there. City of Seattle limits theirs to, they say 8 square feet total. And so you're limited to the number of signs based on that 8 square foot total. And then there is no limit on how long they're there. So they're not going to ask somebody to remove their Black Lives Matter sign or Love is Love sign or their John 3:16 sign or their Welcome to My Garden sign. There's going to be none of that. So I'm just asking that if you're looking at this, you're looking at the business, right-of-way signs, all of that, but if it goes to court, you'll have to provide an adequate justification for why you've restricted it. And it can't be required because other cities aren't doing it. So I request council remove the time limits from the residential yard sign regulation. And in this case, I don't think free speech should have a time limit. And I'll end with my favorite sign, which is, I'd rather be home with my dog. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Strader. Receiving all comments, I will now close the public hearing at 7:10 PM. So first regular item on the agenda tonight is on page 21 of your packet. It is the first read of ordinance 2080-24 regarding MMC Title 17.5. So I will turn the floor back over to our planning manager, she will go more into depth regarding these changes. And then following that, we'll open up the floor for discussion.
Thank you. So basically, I'm going to start on page 23 in the packet. And going along with that, if you want to kind of follow the red line changes of page 59, those are kind of basically I have my agenda summary sort of kind of highlights and tries to summarize what's happening in the red. So if you want to, you might want to follow along both of those together. So the first part is just that we did add some definitions. We modified some definitions, and we removed 2 different definitions that are no longer used in this section. Again, with the intent is just to try to clarify as best we can, make the intent clear, so 5-10 years from down the line, people understand what we were trying to do. And then the next would be the administration section, which goes all the way on page. It's a lot of definitions. Basically, kind of 66 through 68 kind of deals with sort of what, gives us the authority, what permit information is required. So again, basically trying to do some duplication, remove duplication, attempt to clarify whose role is whose. Then we move on to, on page 68 is prohibited signs. Again, nothing drastic. We added pole signs because, as we will talk about later, we did remove pole signs as an option. So we've added that to prohibited. And we just sort of clarified, there was basically, it previously said, no sign may be used as a fence, nor may any fence be used as a sign, nor may any sign be attached to a fence, but a temporary sign may be attached to a fence. And so we just, we felt that just saying permanent signs attached to a fence are prohibited sort of addressed all of those issues. So it was more just, again, simplifying. Other than that, it's more just, there's not a lot. It's more just kind of matching what we've done later in the sections. So then we go to page 70 for exempt signs. And again, we'll get in more depth later, temporary signs and portable signs. But just to kind of point out that we've identified them in the exempt section as well. We also made specific that a sign panel, the replacement of a sign panel in an existing joint tenant sign. So if you've got a building that has, the medical clinic across from the post office, they're just pulling out one panel, putting in the same plastic panel. We're not going to require a permit for that. If they want to change the whole structure, then yes, we are going to require a permit. Again, internal signs, and those gets an accessory sign category. We'll get a little bit more in depth in a bit, but if they're 12 square feet, we're not going to require a permit. Most of the time, those are things like, you'll be towed, or, no parking after a certain time. We're not going to require permits for small little signs. And then so currently a mural is in the exempt category. But the discussion was raised and is that there's a line between a mural and a painted sign. And so what we have tried to clarify is that if it has a logo and a business name, even if it's just painted, that's a sign. And we're going to regulate it as a sign, and they're going to have a permit. But if it's a mural that doesn't have a logo and doesn't have a business name, they're exempt from the permits requirement, but we are requiring a review just to kind of get a feel of what it is. And that, so if you look at the pictures, and hopefully as we get going along, there'll be a lot more pictures to help us understand. So on page 23 is the picture examples. So on the one, yes, it's vegetables and it's probably a grocery store, but they're not, it's not their specific logo. It's not their name. It's just sort of fun decoration of probably a very boring building. We would request to look at what they're doing, but we're not going to require a permit. The one on the other, the Silver Dollar Saloon, they're advertising, it's a sign. We would regulate that as we would any other wall sign. So then as we go, where are we? So we are at, yep. All right, so we are now going to 1750-80. And this is more on the technical nature. So again, we're on page 71 and 24, depending on which section we're in. We've just added some graphics to help understand how you're calculating. So we use things like total sign area. We use sign, we use terms like multi-face signs, sign elements, what's a sign cap. So we've tried to add some pictures that, as we go through, specifically identify what those mean, so someone's not guessing later. And then as we roll through to 1750-083, which is on page 74, we've added some language that requires what's called a master sign permit. Oh, no, wait. Sorry. 1750-080, which is on the page of 72. Got ahead of myself. All that basically says is if something like the warehouse project goes, something like that goes in again, or somebody puts in a multi-tenant building, they have to provide us some sort of plan that somehow coordinates the signs that get posted. So maybe that means they're all the same size, maybe that means they're all the same materials, but they're sort of providing us, it's sort of a yes, if a sign comes in that looks like this, it's okay to be approved. And that helps us. It also helps for the consistency's sake, and it helps with processing along the line. So then we go to signs in the right-of-way, which is 74 in the red copy, and we're still on page 24. So again, we're gonna we hit these again when we get to temporary and portable, but the summary of just this section is that, again, the proposal is to prohibit it in traffic islands. And so the one example is below, all those signs would go away. It also would mean again, we've got the traffic circle coming, so any island circles, we would not allow any signs. They could be allowed on the sidewalk, and I apologize, we did change it to 4 feet. That was one change with the discussion of the attorney, is I think historically it's been 3 feet, but the newest ADA standards are 4, and I want to make sure we match that. So, if our sidewalks are wide enough and there's a 4-foot clearance, they could have like a A-frame sign on the sidewalk. It requires the approval of the abutting property owner. And there's language that says the city can remove, if it's in the right of way, it doesn't meet code without notification. Now, it doesn't, I would say from a current policy, or I don't know, an internal policy, we usually try to, if we know who the owner is, we try to contact them, but the code won't require that. So if we can and we do, that's great, but it wouldn't require us to do that. And that way, if it doesn't meet the code, we can remove it. And then just kind of zipping through freeway signs, our code allows, if you're specifically on basically if you're on 99 and you face the freeway, there's sort of a special section. We didn't really do anything major in that section, and we did delete pole signs. And when we get to the monument section, which is the next page, you'll kind of see the difference. Again, so 76 in the red line starts our monument section. And then we're on 25 for the illustrations. So for monuments, we expanded the illumination standards. And again, because we've eliminated pole signs, what we're saying is that you have to have a 40% base. So as you can kind of see from the drawing, it could be a base that's the full length. It could be a base that's kind of just 40% in the middle, or it could be two 20%. You can kind of divide that up. So if you kind of look at the bottom, the Wendy's sign is a giant pole sign, or the one next to it just has sort of two poles. Those are no's. But if you look up at like the Bay Fair, you know, it's sort of got two nice substantial signs. Some of this is aesthetics. It just gives a nicer appearance to your commercial zones. It even makes a slightly nicer appearance to your manufacturing zones to have a little bit more criteria. With that is also, again, limiting the base. Can't be any more than the equal. So you can't kind of make this huge base with this tiny sign at the top. If you're, you know, we've got some places on Meridian that sort of sit down on a hill, so it makes sense to allow them to have a substantial base, but it can't be any more than the sign, kind of equal. Again, trying to bring those things into line. And then we've added some design standards that require a base, framing, and again, it talks about multiple elements. And that's where kind of that drawing at the beginning kind of talks. The idea that a little bit, you know, you need to have something substantial on the bottom, either substantial on both sides or substantial on one side. It has to have some sort of little cap. Bringing in some design guidelines to make the signs reflect better appearance. Then again, so moving on to the next one is accessory signs. So 80 for the red line, 26 for the summary. And again, accessory, it's just an area of the code that there really wasn't clear code language, and so it felt like it would be helpful. The accessory signs are things like you could have, it's your drive-through right at the entrance or your enter-exit kind of thing. And so that the idea is that you would be allowed one directional side per entry. And again, if there's smaller signs, 12 square feet, they're on the inside, they're not going to require a permit. Maybe it's a little directional that says this business this way, this business that way. But if they get larger than that, kind of like we've got the tall greenish medical one, then yes, we're going to require a permit, make sure it's safe, because once you get a certain height, you're starting to, there's some safety issues and building issues. There's no currently a limit to interior signs. But those signs are designed for customers that have entered an area. They're not advertisements to the street. They're directional signs. They're no parking here signs. Maybe they're the EV parking here kind of signs. And then if you have any accessory structures like an ATM, any other kind of smaller structures, and you're putting signs, that will be considered as, there's a total number for wall signs, so it will be included in that total, which then leads us into wall signs. And yes, so we're still going along. So the numbers, I don't believe, changed with the wall signs from what currently is in our code. But what we have tried to do, again, is sort of do some clarification and make it a little clearer. And we did split, so we used to have kind of 4 categories. The RM and the MX were sort of in one category together. And we moved the RM with the other residential zones. And we moved the MX with community facilities and open space zones. And so basically in the residential zones, you're allowed, so a non-residential, so like a church, a school, a daycare, they can have a sign. Multifamily apartment buildings can have a sign. The maximum total area allowed is 4 feet or 10%, whichever is greater. That's what the current code says. And each sign is limited to a maximum of 32 square feet. So let's say they had enough area their 10% is 64 square feet, they could have 2 signs, limited to 32 square feet. Business is at least 48 square feet. Sorry, that should be square. Or 15%, whichever is more. Again, each sign is limited to a max of 200 square feet. That 15% would have to be very large, but it could be if you're a Safeway. And then the MX, CF, and OS are sort of just a little bit down. Again, maximum total area is 48 square feet, 15%, but their maximum single sign is 100 square feet. So looking at the picture at the bottom, the little blue box, the outside blue, thin blue line that outlines a tenant space, and then the blue square basically shows that's what 15% would be. So that's how much signage they could divide up. And we did kind of clarify that that wall calculation is based on a storefront, a tenant base, or a single building. The way it was written right now is it says building, and so you could interpret it that Safeway gets all of it and nobody gets anything. So I wanted to make sure it was just like each tenant space, each storefront, we would calculate this is their 15% that they get. All right, moving to 27. We're getting in almost to the exciting part. Again, there was desire to clarify electronic message signs. And so we did add a section for that. The key parts to that, so again, we're on 82 in the red line. We're on 27 in the summary. That the electronic, it has to be part of a wall sign or monument. It can't be separate. It has to be part of something that's there. And that maximum of 16 square feet can be an electronic message sign. And I believe you get one, let's see. Yes, you get one or the other. You get an electronic wall sign, or you get an electronic section portion in part of your monument sign. So the size is maximum 16 square feet, and it needs to hold 18 seconds between messages. So that would prevent animation, the idea being that it's less of a distraction for people driving. So, all right, so then we're breaking into long-term portable signs and short-term portable signs. And one of the things that the attorney did do was flip-flop those in the red line version, so I apologize that I don't match that. So we'll go ahead and go with what the summary says. So the idea is that there's two different purposes for portable signs. Sometimes a business will use it, like every day a restaurant puts out their specials, or a store might put out everything's on sale. And then there's those that put it up for special events. We have the food truck. We have real estate signs. So there's two different purposes. And so we've tried to identify what makes sense and put language around both of those. So the long-term, and so we kind of came up with long-term, short-term. We went through a lot of names, but the long-term portable signs are this idea that a business gets one. And we're going to require them to have a permit. So they need to come in and get their permit so they understand what the rules are. It's maximum 12 square feet with a maximum height of 4. Standard is 3 by 4. They have to be displayed during business hours. So it goes out in the morning when you open, it comes in at night. Can be on private property or in a right of way, but it has to be within, which I didn't put in here, so I'm going to add this little bullet point. It needs to be 10 feet from the front door. So the idea is that it's right there. Where that entrance is, it's tied to that business. And it can be on the sidewalk with 4 feet of access. Again, a correction there. So those are long-term. So again, if I've had apartment complexes that want to be able, when they have an opening, to put a sign out. Obviously, some of the coffee places want to put a sign out. This would say you can have one, you can put on it whatever you want, but these are the guidelines. It comes in and out. You have to leave room. It has to be within 10 feet of your front door. So then the opposite of that is, or the alternative is the short-term portable sign. So we're not going to require a permit. But these are the criteria. It has to advertise a specific event or happening. Again, maximum 12 square feet, maximum height 4. There's no limit, but they have to be 500 feet apart. They can only be displayed 2 hours before the event and 2 hours after the event. That is really tight. It means they can't have it out overnight. And no more than 5 days in a 30-day period. So again, this is, so like the food truck. If a food truck is coming in, they can put it out, but it has to be 2 hours before they open. They have to pick it up 2 hours. They can't leave it there all week. If someone's having a real estate open house, they can put it, each corner of the block. But again, it can be out 2 hours before the open house. They have to pick it up 2 hours after. They can't put it up the night before. Allowed on sidewalk with 4 feet, prohibited in traffic islands. And again, we can remove them if they're in violation without notice. So these are, some of these are a bigger change than what we're currently allowing. Temporary signs in the right-of-way is the next one. So page 28, as well as page 84. So temporary, again, yes, what we've tried, again, because temporary signs cover a lot of things. And so again, we're trying to categorize those into smaller chunks. Now, we only did 2. You could probably chunk them into smaller categories, but we split it at least into 2. Temporary signs in the right-of-way, temporary signs on private property. So temporary signs in the right-of-way, very similar. They have to advertise an event or happening. They're limited to 4 square feet, which most of the time that's about 2.5 by 1.5, but 3 feet high. So your stake in the ground gives it a little bit of height. The Planning Commission went with anchored firmly with a stake or wire structure. I know there was conversation at the City Council of maybe only requiring stakes. Planning Commission did discuss it. Their feeling was that wire structures are probably in a lot of ways more common. They're cheaper for candidates or for nonprofits. That's why they went with the language of firmly. So if it's not firmly and it knocks over, then they're in violation and we just go pick it up and they're no longer in the right-of-way. Again, the abutting property owner can object if they don't want it in the right-of-way. Prohibited in traffic islands, it can be removed. And so trying to figure out the timeline is a little bit challenging of what they can be allowed because again, that Supreme Court case we kind of briefly mentioned before, we have 2 different Supreme Court cases that sort of conflict a little bit. So the federal Supreme Court says any kind of nonprofit, non-commercial signs you have to deal with the same. So political signs, real estate signs, Little League sign-up signs, all have to be dealt with the same. But the state Supreme Court, many years ago, came down with that political signs, you have to, the longest the city can say they have to pick it up within 10 days after the election, but they were a little hazy on putting a limit of how long they can be up before an election. And so what I've used before, and so what I'm proposing here is 180 days. 180 days means that someone who chooses to run for election, that's 180 days for them from when you have to register through when you go through primaries and you go through general election. You're not going to need it. The likelihood of you needing it up longer than 180 days is pretty small. But that means every other sign has to fall into that category too to be in compliance with federal law. So any temporary signs in the right-of-way that meet everything, they have to pick it up 10 days after. They can't be up for more than 180 days total. That's how we came to that number. And then the second category was temporary signs on private property. And yes, you have all kinds of different private properties, so it does make it a little, you're trying to kind of do a little bit of everything. So what the Planning Commission and staff came up with is for time limits is grand opening, like lights, balloons, banners, 30 days in a 90-day period, so you can't say you're always going out of business and always have that going on. Residential signs, again, the idea being very similar in size and style to the temporary signs in the right-of-way. We gave it that 180 days limit as well. And then other signs, we came with a 90-day maximum. So if you look at, again, pictures, so the top one, the temporary signs in the right-of-way, again, the first one is an election sign. It's the right size. The one that says prohibited is a simple I buy houses. That's not an event, so it would not be allowed and we would just pull it. On the bottom half, we're dealing with temporary signs. So, preschool now enrolling, you putting up a banner, it can be up for 90 days, then it needs to be taken down, assuming that you're not gonna roll for longer than that. Prohibited after, again, some of these, you're advertising a birthday or graduation, 90 days, then you take it down. Some of these are, they're sort of like permanent, they're using a temporary structure, but it's sort of a permanent sign. Those would be prohibited after 90 days. If it's basically an advertisement, we'd give you 90 days, then we'd say you need to take this down and you probably need to just put up a permanent sign for what you want to do. And then the one that has balloons and chaos, those are 30 days. So that sort of just kind of gets you a feel of what is currently proposed. And then last but not least is the Uptown standards. Because the Uptown District currently has some additional, it's got its own standards and design guidelines for buildings. It's also got a little bit of its own standards for signs. And so the main changes that we're proposing is to allow long-term portable signs on the internal sidewalks. Currently, they're not allowed at all. So our feeling is, again, if one sign within 10 feet, they follow all the rules, that would be okay. Expanded the temporary signs a little bit. Currently, it doesn't allow feather flags, though I do know there's been feather flags in the Uptown District. The feeling was, now that they're not the new thing, they're not used as much, that it would probably be fine to allow one now and then. Again, under the time limits that are proposed, that would fall into the 90 days, and they would have to at least be 100 feet apart. And then the last big one had to do with window signs. We have a lot of businesses, and I believe I think this also might be, I'm not sure if it's 100% in the design guidelines for the buildings, but there's a lot of businesses that seem to cover up their windows. And the studies have been done that people shop more and places look more inviting if you can see inside the windows. And so it would allow, obviously, like the first picture, it's just, individual vinyl cuts that sort of say what's there, but you can still see within the door. The next one, it's not the greatest picture, and I apologize, it's hard to take pictures of windows. But the majority of those windows are open. So maybe you can have kind of 25%. You can put up, a sign that says a special, but then again, it's a temporary, then it comes down. But you wouldn't be allowed to do like with the real estate sign where you just block all your windows. We did come up though that that there would be a deviation, which is sort of like a variance that we could offer. So if you think about the vet clinic up at the complex, their front door and their lobby is clear. You can see the front door, you can see the lobby. That's the public area. It looks very inviting, you feel very safe. They have windows in their clinical areas where the person comes in with their dog. It's, in essence, it's a little medical thing. They could apply for, if it was a new building and they could apply for a deviation saying, hey, these are not public areas. This is why we need these covered, and we would be okay with that. Or, if you go look, I went through all of these buildings. I went through Safeway. Safeway has parts that you know, you can see in where the carts are, you can see in the doors, but then they have window coverings, which are their storage areas and their offices and stuff. So we figured a deviation would give us the ability to say, yes, your public areas are open. We understand that's not a public area. We're okay with a sign, because the next one might come in and want those to be open, and that way the building's designed that way. So I know that's a lot, but I'm happy to take any questions or comments at this point. And again, we can sit on it and bring it back for just discussion at the next meeting as well, or if everyone's perfectly happy, we could put it on for action.
Mayor Pro Tem Whitaker?
Thank you. I'm curious, how do the blow-ups, how do they work into this? Do they work into this at all?
Let me back up here. Let me find the temporary signs. How did we do that? We took out air dancers as allowed, or at least as part of the definition of what is a temporary sign for that. I assume that's what you're talking about?
Yeah, you know, yeah.
Let me double check if it's specifically.
I wasn't sure if I missed that or if you had addressed it.
So it prohibits blinking, flashing balloons, searchlights, cluster of flags, strings of twirlers, flares, and other carnival-like displays except as approved as temporary signs. And the current proposal the Planning Commission had was to eliminate flares. I'm not sure that that was ever a good idea. Air dancers and other carnival-like displays.
So it's air dancers is what they're called, okay. And
The
those
ones
are-
that go like this.
Yeah, so those are prohibited.
Which I realized after we did that, we had one at the last city event, so maybe they're okay.
Okay,
So they couldn't be considered temporary, is what you're saying?
Under the temporary, we took it out.
Okay.
But again, I'm not sure that that's a strong thing either way.
and I like I agree with you, it should add to the character and integrity of the city and of the business. And so, yeah, like the tall, signs with the metal posts, yeah, just aren't attractive. At least these signs are attractive. Yeah, it's nice even going through business parks in other towns and they have the nice solid concrete or composite signs. Just improves the look of everything. It's like wearing a suit to an interview. Just sweetens it up a little bit.
Can I add something about the window coverings? So Chief Hernandez and I, gosh, it's probably been a year or so now, we walked the property at Safeway Complex with, not the Safeway, but the rest of it. And one of the comments the property manager made is she was looking for us to refine our window coverings because they felt that when the windows are all covered, especially the door and the adjacent windows, it was a safety concern. And so they asked us actually to also clarify and strengthen that language because they were asking their tenants not to do it, but our code allowed it. So there was this difference of opinion amongst them. Councilmember Wayland, do you have a question?
I have a few, and I was hoping that maybe I'd hear your answers and not duplicate them. Maybe won't duplicate this, but I've got quite a few, actually. On page, let me see just where I start here and so forth. Just on page 24, it has to do with the right-of-way sign. Is it 3 feet clearance or 4 feet clearance?
It's been changed to 4 feet clearance.
It's 4 feet.
Yeah,
Is
I
that-
apologize for that.
Yeah, there's a few places here where it mentions 3 feet.
Yeah, the red line copy, the actual, it should say 4 feet. It's just I did a copy and paste, and unfortunately, that was one of the things I missed that we had changed.
I thought so, reading the rest of it, but I just wanted to be sure
Yep.
which one is the correct one. On the monument signs, we have a height limitation?
Yes.
And I'm sorry, that would be, I was just reading on page 25. Pardon? Yeah, no, I was just a little bit curious because, of course, we have one sign here that I can't tell you how many feet it is. And there's no sign on the bottom which gives you vision, you know, past the sign and so forth. It's not like a wall. But how tall of a sign like that were we able to put up in Milton?
How high?
Like the Bay Fair on page 25. How high? What would our height restrictions be? Is there?
Let's see, 12 feet. So, oh no, sorry, yes. We would allow a 12-foot high sign.
All right, thank you. I'm sure it's in the packet here, but I didn't transfer it to
Nope.
these pages.
That's fine. And that is what we currently allow, so that's not a change. That is what our current code allows, is a 12-foot high sign in both the business district, the manufacturing, and interestingly enough, the RM.
And I hope some of this answers to your all questions, so I might as well ask them. On page 26, the accessory signs, directional sign, how wide can that be? How restrictive on must it be a minimum of a 4-foot sidewalk?
So the accessory signs,
I'm talking about the drive-through right now. How wide does the sidewalk have to be to allow pedestrian travel without obstruction for this particular type sign?
so accessory, if you're talking accessory signs, they would not be allowed on the sidewalk. Those are permanent signs that they would have to apply for, and they would have to meet clearance, vision clearance and everything, and they couldn't be, they'd have to be in like a landscaped area.
All right, so what I'm seeing here in the drive-through, on the drive-through, directional sign, the drive-through, that's not on a sidewalk.
That one does look like it, does it?
It kind of does, and that's why.
So I was just grabbing because I saw drive-through, I didn't pay attention. So no, we would not allow it on a sidewalk.
Okay, good, because our sidewalks aren't that big in
No.
all the places. Electronic message signs. We fit this, no animation. We don't use animation at all on our electronic message sign.
We didn't, but I did see one at Christmas time.
Say it one more time. I was writing a note.
So the proposal is that you have to do 8 minutes and you can't have animation.
Yeah, our community outreach person was trying to fancy it up. So I did note that. And I did get some feedback on it anyway, so I think that will be changing.
Again, it's.
And obviously it'll be changing if code changes.
Yeah, so
We
that's
have
a.
two signs, you know, two
Yeah.
different signs and so. I don't want the city to be different than the businesses and so forth.
Right, and we can, yeah, it sounds like it's maybe just a one-time thing from the city. We can talk about that, but that's kind of standard because again, from a safety perspective, it's less distracting. So,
No, it has to be there for a while because it's very distracting if you try to read it and it moves on you.
yeah,
Another mention here on page 27, which is the short-term portable signs and so forth. Again, they need to have 4 feet clearance on sidewalks? Or-
yes,
Okay, so that's.
yes. Everywhere it says 3 feet, it should say 4 feet.
Very good. That answers a lot of questions I have later on this.
Planning Manager Stoniker, oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Whalen, did you have another question?
More
Okay,
so.
sorry to
Forgive
interrupt you.
me for laboring through this. Let me see where I've got this. On the temporary signs on private property is the main word. I couldn't have a sign on there graduating the class of 2023 for more than 90 days. It's my private property, my certain rights and so forth. Let me give you a little history. In Milton, many years ago, there was a change in our trash service. I don't know if you all remember that, we used to have. They would come physically and take the can and load it in the truck, and then we would head to Murray's. There was a house on 17th that at their fence, inside of their fence, and their fence was significantly away from their right-of-way. In other words, where the city's right-of-way was. It was up the hill and behind it. And two 4x8s with rather interesting language written on them. We were told by the rights of an individual, on your own personal property, what you put up is what you can have, and you can have it for as long as you want it on private property. Now, I'm not saying right against the right-of-way, you know, the right-of-way in front of my house. I've got a concrete wall that sits there. But as long as it was inside that, the state of Washington said that they can have that. That's a right-of-way, a rights issue to display that. So I see other things in here that giving timelines on things that are on private property.
I'd be curious to see that, the case you're talking about. Our current code, the one that's active right now, says yard signs not exceeding 24 by 36 inches are permitted in all residential zones for not more than 90 days in a calendar year.
State of Washington has said it can be up there as long as they want. It's their property, it's their sign, it's their feeling of an expression and so forth. So I'm a little bit confused as to where the state may have changed its position on what is private property. I don't want to put something in code that has some background in it that may not be, once you make a mistake.
I'll do some research on that.
Yeah, please, because there are other signs that have been up for a long time in the city of Milton.
Right,
That
they
generally
have
reference-
chosen not to enforce.
Generally reference some spiritual beliefs. And I don't think we have any right to take one of their signs down. It's just, you know, the public right to express their opinion on their personal property. So I'm a little maybe overly cautious about what temporary signs is on private property. What about permanent signs on private property? I think there has to be some understanding of what is permanently allowable by the state as opposed to what the city may want to use as allowable. Just a caution and a follow-up.
Councilmember William, before you ask your next one, can I clarify something you said or piggyback on that question a little bit? Is that okay, real quick, if I insert a
Yeah.
comment? Okay.
Yeah.
So, Planning Manager Stelnecker, like, I understand, like, on my personal yard, like, people don't want to be told what they can and cannot do. But residential also includes apartments, correct? And so I can see where we don't want some of these big signs up all the time, but it's residential still. Or I'm running a business out of my residential home and I decide to put up a temporary sign that slowly becomes permanent. So is there a way to separate a home versus other residential properties?
Possibly.
I mean, just a thought.
If it's soliciting for something, that's one thing. If it's advising for you to do something, but if it has to do with your political, spiritual, or heartfelt opinion, that's a dangerous area to walk into.
But we do have to treat all signs the same. So
then
we can't just say you can have a political belief, religious sign in your yard forever, but you can't have a I support 5 high school sign in your yard forever, or go dogs, or pick up your dog poop. You know, like, we can't say this sign is okay and this sign isn't.
But you can have a sign in your yard expressing your opinion on something. And that
Yes.
that should not be limited to a time period.
Yes, but then you would have to allow all signs not to have a time period.
I think you might find clarity in that with the state. I don't know that
Yeah.
for a fact. But when that's private property. That's my opinion. If I wanted to put the sign up that said God is great, nobody's going to take that down forever. If I said God is great with a question mark, should somebody be able to take it down?
No,
There's-
but I hear you, but I think I think part of the thing we're trying to look at is kind of businessy signs that are going in residential
You can do a little bit
zones.
difference between a commercial sign and a non-commercial sign.
Yeah.
But Again, I will, if you know what the Supreme Court case is, that would be helpful. If not, I will do research. Because I would say in general, I believe cities do regulate signs on private property to some extent as well. And so I will do some research and I will get some better answers to that.
Thank you for letting me interrupt you.
Now, I've got a few more
Okay.
before I finish. Uptown standards. There's a couple questions I'd like to ask about that. Long-term portable signs are allowed on internal sidewalks. What's the width minimum of the sidewalk to put an internal sign? If we have it, you have to have 4 feet unobstructed.
And they may not, most of those may not be available, but there are areas that you probably could do that. I'm not sure what the sidewalk is through all of that. I know there's areas around Safeway that are wider.
Yes, so you get the advantage if you're on a wide one. If you got a 4-foot sidewalk, you can't do this. You can't, I think.
But yes, but there also are different, you could do again, if the sidewalk is 5 feet, there are narrow, again, I'm not 100% sure how wide those sidewalks are, but it doesn't always have to be an A-frame. There are some straight up and down signs that maybe you could do. So it just allows flexibility.
The reason I'm asking this is that in most of the years that I can visualize a sign like this would be put up, let's just say the plaza or Surprise Lake Plaza. Most of the sidewalk, or a lot of the sidewalk, is impeded by cars that pull up to the stop bar and their bumper is a foot or 2 feet onto the sidewalk or over the sidewalk. I don't know what we have here to do that, but that's a consideration that needs to be taken with the use of a sign, uptown standards, where it might be. That's what it's on. It's on, the section leads into uptown standards. But if you had a sign right at the edge of the curb, if somebody wants to park, it's going to push it into the sidewalk further. It's just something to add to your thoughts.
Yeah, the idea being, I guess, was that currently we allow those in other parts of the city, but they were specifically prohibited in Uptown. I'm assuming it was sort of from a visual standpoint, and our feeling was if they had certain restrictions that they could be acceptable there. But yes, not every place would be allowed to have them, and not every place has internal sidewalks. So
We have sections in town here that has parking adjacent to their building with the sidewalk, that when you do park there and you bump the stop bar, you're blocking some of that sidewalk, and that sidewalk no longer is code.
mhm.
It's out of code because another obstruction is temporary and going over. That's a subject for another day. We used to have blow up wave signs proliferate in the city. Where are they within these standards? Allowable, usable, and what restrictions would they have? Because we've had not the flag wavers. These are the ones with the blow up motors and so forth. They sit on the edge of the curve and they wave. What restrictions should we have in a sign code? The sign code, it's a welcome, whatever it says. It's attracting business. So I'm not sure where these might fit within the code. And it's like everything else, if you don't try to include everything that you have to include, you have to come back and changes are as expensive as they are to add them.
So I think if they were, possibly they would be allowed maybe as part of sort of a grand opening thing, that was the 30 days. But let me double check how the prohibited is written.
Well, I just bring it up so forth just to be sure, because sometimes they've been up a lot longer and a lot more, maybe 25 feet between them. And they were primarily on Meridian.
Yeah, so balloons are not allowed, so if it was considered a balloon, it would not. Again, it's as if it's a carnival-like display, which is a little But unless we specifically allow it under temporaries, they would not be allowed. So we're not specifically allowing those, so I would say probably no.
And that, probably no is a good answer to me. I'm saying, if you
Yeah.
can make that happen, that would be a good thing in my mind.
Yeah, they were trying to limit it to things that are just sort of some banners, some lights, something that doesn't take up a lot of space.
Yes, but some of them take up more space if the
Yeah.
wind blows one way than they take another way. No. And that's what I have for this section of this code right now, so, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Whalen. Council Administrator, did I see your hand?
Well, I was going to say that on your point about a business in a residential area with signs, and I thought that was restricted from as long as the business was there, you could not have anything that showed that you were a business.
Under the home occupation permit, it says no signs allowed.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that works.
So,
But that doesn't exclude apartments, correct? Like if, like your example
Right, you can
here-
have an apartment building can have a sign for them. You know,
Okay.
this is the such and such apartments, or the hope, or they could put out a sign that says, you know, currently have a room for rent or something.
right.
But that's
Well,
different.
I'm thinking like the example on page 28, the third one in that says prohibit after 90 days. That to me kind of looks like maybe something an apartment would put up potentially, or a summer camp program. I don't know. I feel like there might be a difference between my personal yard and,
Mhm,
you know, apartments or other facilities that are in residential.
mhm.
Councilmember, is that your question?
Well,
Yeah.
that was one of them. Yeah, I too have a problem with us regulating free speech on private property. I think there needs to be a distinction between business and private property. The other thing that I would like to see is that no sign can block, obscure, or interfere with the vision of any driver. Something to that.
Yeah, that's, if it's a, yes, that's in there.
It is in there. Okay, I missed it. And you said that they removed pole signs. Does that include speed limit signs, the city stop signs? Those are pole signs, correct?
Yeah, so anything, so the exempt section, any signs erected or sanctioned by a government agency are exempt from the permits. And so, and the code. So, yeah. And legal notice, identification, traffic, other signs erected or required by government authority under any law, statute, ordinance. So there's several things that talk about government signs.
And what about a definition of a traffic island?
A definition of a,
Definition of a traffic island, and then a definition of roundabout. I think those two should be distinguished.
so I guess the feeling of a, do you want to, I don't know, jump at me. I think there's probably standard assumed definitions for a traffic island. Basically, it's a piece of property with streets around it.
Well, roundabouts are relatively new to the language, and so that's why I think that would give it clarity. There's
I
no-
guess my assumption was that the traffic island was, or the traffic circle was creating an island.
Okay,
And so by using the term island, it takes anything that has streets around it. But we can always create a definition for island if that would be helpful.
yeah, okay. And then, that's all I got for right now.
Councilmember Hall, did I see your hand?
Yes. Is there a distance between signs that we could put in code? Especially at, I've seen schools cover up signs, I've seen election signs cover up election signs, where they're all, and it looks horrible, it's not effective. Is there something we could put in code for that? Yeah, or a
Um,
separation distance.
Yes. So let me double check how we have it been currently.
And you're not referring to, like, for instance, our political signs have to be, is it 300 feet, or did we change that? So far apart, but you're saying, like, if you and Dave went out together, that your sign would need to be farther away. You want a distance between, like, your two signs.
Also, when there's a T-ball sign.
Yeah.
I've seen them being covered up
Got it.
by other signs, not
Okay.
necessarily just elections, but signs on top of signs. What's the distance code on that? That's way everybody will know what that is, and it's easier to follow.
So we currently, make sure I'm in the right section. 84, okay. So we currently are saying that temporary signs shall not be within 100 feet providing the same information. But you're talking about people who are multiple people all
Yes,
trying to cram into the same little tiny space.
right.
I don't believe that we specifically address that.
Personally, I think it's really important. Even in elections, I accidentally did it in front of somebody, an apartment or something. It was an apartment. I felt bad, so I went back and I moved it.
I guess you only have so much space, though. So how do you determine who comes first and who came second, right? Because if I have to be personally, I think it's 300 feet, or did we change it to
It's
5?
currently 300, we're
Okay.
recommending 100.
So if my sign has to be every 500 feet, and then you come in and you put it 100 feet away from me, eventually we're going to run out of space, and someone's not going to be able to put their political sign, or any sign, which probably then would create a different problem.
Now, I don't know that we have enforced not having multiple signs in the same area. So it's possible that people are putting 3 or 4 of their own signs in one area. We could look at that.
That happened in 2020.
Yeah, I didn't see it
It
happen.
didn't happen this time because
Okay.
we didn't have that many signs. But it kind of got ridiculous on people putting signs in front of people's signs. And I think that's just bad karma.
What about just having, your sign can't block another sign, something to that effect?
How many feet?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you want to put.
I mean, even
feet,
if it, I mean, you
just
could,
keep it
I
simple
guess,
that you can't block somebody else.
it's something like 2 feet or, I mean, I don't know.
Something to think about anyway.
Okay. To clarify Mr. Strader, or Councilmember Strader's question, the section of signs in the right-of-way, it currently does, and we kept it, it specifically talks about that vehicle area clearance and that they have to follow all of those rules. So that's in here and it stays in here.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hall, was that your question?
That was,
For now?
yeah, that was
Okay.
my main question.
Okay. Councilmember Cedar?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I see in the, just to follow up on Councilmember Hall's point, I see in the sign plan, the language that signs must not obscure the view of other signs that are consistent with this chapter. I don't see that language repeated for temporary signs. That phrasing seems like it would be sufficient because it is kind of a judgment call, right?
Where is that?
That's in, under the master sign
Oh,
plan. I
okay.
don't recall which one that is. But,
Yeah.
subsection 80.
Interesting. Okay.
So I would support, adding that into temporary or non-permanent signs. And then as far as the vision issue, which I think is a great one, I read this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you just referenced this section, the section 83, which is signs in the right of way. That is essentially defining any sign that's out there. It doesn't matter if it's short-term, long-term, or anything. If it's violative of the vision clearance area, it is non-conforming, right?
Correct.
Okay. I appreciate that clarification because I see it specifically spelled out in the long-term portable signs where it says long-term portable signs may not block pedestrian, vehicle, or vision clearance areas. I don't see that language elsewhere. I just see a reference back to section 83, for instance, in the short-term portable signs. So I think that it does the same thing, just in a different way.
Yeah, I think it may just be because the assumption is the right-of-way covers it, but
Yeah, I think it's there.
some of it duplicates, and so, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's there, and so I guess it's just I want to highlight it.
Okay.
I think it looks good like that. I had a question about. I have several questions here. But before I move off it, regarding Councilmember Strader's point, I would like to see something in the definitions as well for like anything that meets the definition in the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So that would be stuff like traffic islands or roundabouts. That way, if some new thing comes out,
Yeah.
we're just adopting those definitions. So we don't have to say specifically, here's what a roundabout is. We can just say
We
you know,
use that.
terms consistent with the manual or the MUTCD are used herein.
Okay.
You talked about so this is referring to section 70, and not really a specific thing, but you talked about the murals, and the mural, the examples you gave are very specific. Like here's a picture mural, here's a sign mural. That one's easy, right? But you also alluded to some kind of review process where someone could have it checked out.
Mhm.
What would that look like? Because I would hate for someone to have to paint a mural and then get it checked. I mean, are you thinking like if someone came in with a napkin drawing or a sketch of what their
Yes.
intended mural is?
Yes, prior to painting, they would have to have it reviewed by the city.
And I don't see a specific mechanism for that spelled out in here. Is that something that, I mean, I guess I'm kind of curious what you think. If we need to have that spelled out, or is it your experience that people intending to paint a mural check in with the city?
Probably not. The way it's written is painted wall, so under the exempt section, painted wall decorations or murals without business names or logos. So basically, they're exempt. However, a rendition of the mural shall be reviewed and approved by the community development director prior to placement to ensure that it meets the definition of a wall mural.
Perfect. Thank you. That's exactly what I didn't see.
Yep.
Okay. Regarding section 60, just before that one, it references, and specifically section 60D, as in Delta. No, excuse me, C, right before that. Signs displaying obscene matter. It references a statute, and I would just ask you to double check that statute number. I believe the statute you intend to reference ends in .010, not 020.
Okay.
Just when I looked it up,
I'll
it
make
seemed
Still
yeah.
the same.
I
Those
would just-
change over time.
Yep, absolutely. And then right before that is B. And so this is going to be one of two kind of major issues I have. B seems to say we can't erect our own signs, which of course makes sense. But it also, there's a lot of those, like the child walking out with the flag, crossing signs that people put out that say, hey, stop, slow down, or like signs that say, slow down, this is not a racetrack up on 15th. I mean, frankly, I think those signs are important. It shows that the city cares about traffic devices beyond what's already available to them from the city. And so I have a problem with B in that it seems to give the city a mechanism to remove those signs. So what I would like to see, and I don't know where other people stand on this, but what I would like to see is something that says signs that both use that language and appear to mimic official signage, because I think that's what's actually at issue, right? And it kind of references the MUTCD. So maybe that's the intent. But I don't want to see people start losing those signs, which I think are really important for our kids. So I'd be interested to hear other thoughts on that, if people can look at that section specifically, which again is 60B. Maybe we can talk about it next time. I'm looking at page 39 of the packet. And then I also have a problem with the section 140A, which is limits on private property signs. And I will be pretty specific about what my problems are. So any limits, we've kind of talked around it a little bit. I think Ms. Strader raised it in her public comment, and we've heard it from council a couple times here. But essentially, my opinion is that if the city or any government entity is restricting language on private property, then there has to be, it's going to get the strictest level of scrutiny because it's First Amendment issues. And that's a very hard standard to meet. So things like, so basically, if we go through this list of 1 through 8, we need to have a compelling reason why the city's, I can't remember the articulation of the test, but a very compelling reason, basically. And so, 1, easy, flashing temporary signs. Of course, we don't want flashing lights on private property, safety concern. And a lot of these have those issues. But when we get down to that one with the 180 days in a calendar year, I don't see a compelling reason why the city should limit that. And I strongly disagree that that would pass constitutional muster. And the case that I am specifically referring to is a U.S. Supreme Court case called City of Ladau versus Giglio, which highlights a lot, it uses a lot of, it's a 1994 case, but I believe it's still good law. And it highlights a lot of language about how important it is for citizens to have the freedom to express like a political belief. Like for instance, people didn't want to free Tibet for half the year. They wanted to free it for many years in a long time. And a person should be allowed to display that sign on their property so long as it's not a public nuisance. And I strongly disagree that this should be included in here at all. So I would like to see that removed. And finally, this isn't really a point. I'm just kind of curious how we hope to do this. This is not a point of contention for me. But in section 115, which is the electric message signs, I wonder if there's a way to regulate based on lumen value or something along those lines. And the reason I say that, like the brightness of the sign itself, perhaps at night the sign must be limited to a specific brightness versus during the day it can be brighter. And the reason I say that, I love our businesses, but some of those digital signs, when you're walking, it is an absolute eyesore at night, and very distracting when you're driving. It's like a blast of light. So I would like to see that a little bit more tailored to the brightness issue.
Can I comment on that one
Please.
before you move on? And I can double check that connects what you're after. We do, in our illumination standards that we added for both monument, I believe, and walls, and I will double check, we did say that internally illuminated signs or a digital sign may not exceed a light output of 100 nits during nighttime hours. So basically it's right above that section.
Yeah, and that would cover, so I guess
Yeah, it doesn't say it in that section, which I could bring that into that section, but
no,
it
I don't
does.
think it needs to. As long as it's in there, I guess, is there a distinction between an electric message sign and an electric wall sign?
So an electric message sign has to either be part of a wall, basically it has to be a wall sign, or it has to be a part of a monument sign. So it's going to also fall under those two categories, one or the other.
So let's take the cities. We can pick on the city, right? Is the city sign down by West Milton Field, is that a monument sign then?
Technically, it's a pole sign, but yes. If it was to be built in the future, it would be considered a monument sign. It'd have to meet all the monument sign standards as well as the electronic message standards.
So if that sign were constructed today, well, I think it would be non-conforming then, wouldn't it?
It's going to end up being non-conforming.
But it's grandfathered in, right?
Conforming probably pretty easily.
Yeah. I don't mean to call it the city. I actually love that sign. So
Basically, we just need to build some towers around the two poles, because it's on two poles, isn't it? Yeah, we had
The
this
one down
discussion.
there is, yeah.
yeah,
it'd be
yeah,
fine.
the framing for it. So then in that case, then it would fall under monument, and then it would comply with the required nits. So I use lumens. Maybe nits is the right phrasing.
Yeah, and I do, NITS is the current thing. It changes, it'll probably change in a few years, but that's the current one.
Okay. All right. That sounds great. I love it. Thank you. I appreciate that.
We do still have 4 more items, and so is there a question that maybe the two of you, because you haven't had a chance to speak, Councilmember White or Councilmember Preddy?
No, I'm good for right now.
You're good? Okay. Councilmember White?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to second Councilmember Cedar's comment with regards to the residential yard signs. I think if somebody wants that kind of issue to be regulated, they can live in an area that has a homeowners association. But I don't think we have any right to trespass in that area.
Noted.
And I would like it removed as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I would echo that too. Unfortunately, the street I live on, when Diamond Estates was built in 1981, the CC and Rs limit signage on the houses. And so, if you believe it or not, we have residential areas in our city that won't allow signs on the houses because of things that were developed back then or even now.
You don't violate it? Good job.
No, I violate it probably, I don't know.
Okay, so is it safe to assume that you'd want to bring this back as a study item or discussion item next time? Okay, perfect. So we'll bring back on February, was that 4th, I believe? Okay, so next item on our on our agenda is on page 93 of our packet. It's the Planning Commission 2024 work plan. I will turn the floor over to our planning manager once again, and then following her review, we'll need a motion to open up the floor.
Can I borrow your packet? Thank you. So thank you, Mayor and Council. So basically, due to so first I just want to point out the accomplishments of the Planning Commission in 2023, that we forwarded on ADUs that got passed by council, the fence and eviction clearance, wireless, and we're currently working on signs. And I just think that one of the things that the city council asked us to do is to try to be a little more efficient but yet it still address hopefully adequately these important topics. So I just want to bring attention to the Planning Commission, the great job that they have done to address these items, so there's that. There's one carryover from last year's items that has to do with just basically correcting the wetland category table, and so they will be having a public hearing on that this month. It'll probably come next month. It's a very straightforward issue, and then we're done with the items from 2023. So as we work into 2024, in essence, it's filled with the mandatory comprehensive plan update, as well as a lot of state mandated code changes. Some of those will probably, I would assume confidently, will roll into, we have until the end of June 2025 to get the state mandates done. But if you will, so basically the Planning Commission work plan is all of those items. It's going to take this year plus. So we did not add anything else. But we are working with Framework on both the Growth Management Act, obviously the comprehensive plan, and I believe, so Framework is coming to the Planning Commission. Our meeting got pushed back this month, so they're coming at the end of January to kind of give an update to Planning Commission where we're at. They've made great progress. And then I believe they're on the schedule to come to the City Council in February to give you the same kind of update and give you a progress of where we are with that. And then they're also Framework, because of the grant money that we received, they will also be helping us with the housing bills and changes to code. So that is a great asset, and they will help us with that. But then the other items, staff will do working with the Planning Commission as well. So anyway, by the time we get through all of that, we have filled 24 and then probably half of 2025. So that is our proposal.
Councilmember Cedar?
I move to approve the attached Planning Commission work plan for 2024.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Cedar and seconded by Councilmember Peretti to approve the attached Planning Commission work plan for 2024. Councilmember Cedar, did you want to speak to your motion?
Briefly, yes, thank you, Mayor. Planning Commission is doing excellent work. Planning Manager Stallnecker, so great work to you. Great accomplishments last year, and this is a heavy lift getting all those state mandates done, so I appreciate this list. One quick question I had for you was regarding the traffic calming plan. Does that need to go through the Planning Commission before we will see it here, or is that something that we are planning to see outside of that?
I don't believe that will need to go through the planning. The things that go through Planning Commission are basically any changes we make to 16, 17, or 18. So the traffic calming, unless there's something in those sections that we want to add at some later date, they specifically are usually, there's will probably end up being more part of the Public Works design guidelines and stuff.
That's what I would anticipate. Great. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Preddy?
I concur with Councilmember Cedar on the heavy lift that this will be, especially when you're working with all the GMA requirements that are coming down the pipe with all these House bills and that. So I appreciate that work that's being done there. I'm glad to see wireless on the docket. There's some things I think we need to do here in the city regarding that, and I'm glad to see that there.
The wireless was just on what we accomplished last year, not that we're adding it to next
Well,
year's.
I think there's a House bill that just came down. I was reading the
Oh,
other
is
night.
there? Okay.
Yeah, that is going to be hitting us again with that whole area, and so
Okay.
it'll be coming back.
If that, yes, and when that comes back, the feeling I got the last round is there would have been a lot more comprehensive that the city council would have liked to have addressed, so we will take that into consideration.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, concerns from council? Mayor Protem?
You, yes, and I concur that, wow, they have their work cut out for them. And just the work that they've done up to this point is commendable. And it's good to hear that they have assistance in help them what they have to accomplish. On the HB 1110, increasing middle housing, what is middle housing?
So middle housing is basically kind of duplex through maybe like garden apartments, two-story apartments. It's those things that are not full-fledged apartment complexes, which is usually that's kind of what you get in most cities. We have a lot of single family that takes up a lot of space, and then we cram in a bunch of the 5, 6-story apartments. And so the idea is to try to allow that stuff in the middle. So you're allowing more triplexes, quadplexes, duplexes, and again, maybe some, what they call courtyard apartments where it's not any higher than regular housing, but they're smaller units. So you can tuck them in with single family housing or cottage housing. So there's a lot of creative things there. Milton doesn't have to, due to our population, we don't have to do all of the options, but we do have to have varieties and stuff. And so I think there's some really creative, fun ways that can add some potential unit density that meets the criteria of the state, but still keeps the character of the neighborhoods. That will be our goal.
Okay, thank you. Kind of made me think of Middle Earth. When you said cottage housing.
We're not living in
kind of-
caves, no.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? This is an action, oh, sorry, Councilmember Whalen?
I'm sorry, on the planning commission's work, have we defined or completely defined the potential annexation areas? Do we have had some consideration on the other side of Meridian? There was additional consideration, I thought, in Five Heights and so forth. But can you, not now, but give us kind of a complete list or an idea list of what those areas are? And that's all.
Okay, I'll come back with that.
Okay.
I have one.
Councilmember Hall?
I'm noticing when duplexes are being built currently, they're allowed so many parking spaces, but they are really in the road up here on 11th, that new one. Is there a way to kind of figure out how many parking spaces they really should have for those new duplexes coming in? Because, yeah.
I mean, they meet, the problem comes when people don't use their garages. I mean, because I think ours is 2, but if they have a garage, if they have a 2-car garage, that's 2 spots. They have the same setback as single-family houses, which is 20 feet in the front. So they should be meeting all of those, which is the same as single-family houses. And I will say the new code will say that whatever we do has to be this, whatever you allow for single-family, you have to allow for things like duplexes. Again, I think unfortunately sometimes It's obvious there because it's next to City Hall and it's next to the fire department. We drive by it a lot. I would suspect that there are other places in town here and there where people have too many cars and they're using their garage for storage and they kind of spill out. So,
So is it more of a code issue then?
I think it's more of just different, people need to,
Well, the fire department has to get by. I had to call police one day because they had literally put an awning out in the street, hooked to a trailer, and was blocking.
yeah, and if
Half-
that, I mean, if they're blocking the street, then that's a police department issue and they'll go out and talk to them and they do a great job of that.
And they did.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You know, that's, again, sometimes it's the person renting it versus, or living it or owning that house.
Sometimes there's 8 vehicles hooked to that house in the evenings, plus a trailer and sometimes a boat.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a one-case thing, but
And I think 'cause
walking, I just noticed more.
And like I said, it's a very obvious one, and it's one that seems to have that. I think you'll find other, I mean, there'll be single-family houses that do the same thing, and there's be duplexes that don't.
You're right.
So we've tried to let people know and then try to enforce that as we can in various ways. I think we've sent notes when they get too carried away, or letters, and I know the police department, when they get into the street, has done. So I don't know that it's a specific code thing. It could just be that those particular spots, we try to be a little more diligent to express that they are causing problems, so.
Yeah, well, I'm just worried that we're putting a house within a house that's already there. You know, is there going to be enough parking space in reality?
Well, and again, if you're a duplex, you have to have 2 for each. So in essence, you have to have 4, where a
Right.
single family you only have to have 2. And again, there are places that have single families that own 6, 7, 8 cars. So
Yeah, I agree. Okay, thank you.
Really quick, Councilmember Hall, there is either a House bill or Senate bill I will forward to everybody that I think is trying to eliminate parking requirements. So if this is something you're passionate about, I would highly recommend you stay involved with at least that bill. I will look it up and I'll send it to everybody.
Yes, please, yes.
Councilmember Whalen.
Just a little add-on a little bit for parking as an issue. Is parking an issue here on Laurel Street besides with the cars? 8 cars sometimes to a house. But on 11th, that house probably should have been required to put in curb gutter and sidewalk on a collector street. There isn't very much going there, but that is a collector in the city of Milton. And that is one way to help mitigate excessive parking. Now, they're going to go someplace else. Maybe, I have no idea where, but that one probably should have had curb gutter and sidewalk required.
and neither Public Works Director Madden or I were involved in the approval of that one. I will say we are very careful right now of what are those streets that we're making people put in curb gutter sidewalk on those streets that are intended to be throughs, and my guess is we would have probably required it. Yes.
Yeah, it's happening on Taylor. The houses now are required, or a lot
And they're
of
putting
places
them in.
required to put in curb gutter and sidewalk, and that's going to be a great help.
Yeah.
But there are other ways to help mitigate this.
Sorry, I got you off track.
This is an action item. Are there any comments from the audience? Okay. It has been moved by Councilmember Cedar and seconded by Councilmember Peretti to approve the attached Planning Commission work plan for 2024. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried 7-0. Moving on to our next item this evening, it's on page 97 of your packet. It is a ordinance 2081-24 for did we decide it was Zayo Group, which is a franchise agreement. I will turn the floor over to Director Madden, and then following his review, I'll need a motion to open up the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. The item before you tonight is an ordinance which will replace a previous ordinance issued in May of 2013. And it is for a franchise agreement with the Zayo Group. And It is for communication lines. A new ordinance is required to renew the franchise agreement with the Zayo Group for this 10-year period. The agreement has been reviewed by the city's legal team. A little background on Zayo LLC. They are a global fiber optic infrastructure provider used by other companies such as Comcast and others, and phone companies, federal, state, local agencies. And they are seeking to renew this franchise agreement. And I realize that this expired in May of 2023, and it took some time to communicate what this franchise agreement would look like with Zayo. And so we're bringing it before you right now. The recommended action is to approve ordinance 2081-24 and adopt the ordinance with the Zayo Group LLC.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. I move to approve ordinance 2081-24, adopting Zayo Group LLC franchise agreement.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Whitaker and seconded by Councilmember Cedar to approve ordinance 2081-24, adopting Zayo Group LLC franchise agreement. Mayor Pro Tem, did you want to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you. So they've been a provider, a franchisee for 10 years. So I assume, obviously, you have a good relationship with them. In regard to the nature of their business with the city, would you say that that's the longevity of that relationship is a benefit? I mean, could somebody else step in and do the same thing? I'm playing devil's advocate.
They could, but Zayo is established. They have familiarity with the city of Milton since 2013, to my knowledge, and things may have happened in the past, but we have had no complications or misunderstanding with Zayo, and we've been on good terms with them through all the processes.
No, I wasn't against it. I just thought of that could. So where is specifically the fiber optic network that they manage for the city?
It is throughout the city. I've seen them along Milton Way and also along Fifth Avenue, but there are no restrictions about where they could potentially, put fiber as long as it is in the designated areas outlined in this franchise agreement.
Okay, and so I would assume that would interface with the legacy systems networks elsewhere, correct?
Yes.
But they only manage up to that point, right? To where those systems would interface? I'm talking about like the copper, where I'm assuming they would interact with that. They kind of have to.
They
Or
do.
don't they?
I guess maybe you can reframe the question. I believe that they coexist in most
Okay,
locations.
Okay, but they are not, they're only responsible for the fiber optic aspect of the network. And that's it, I would assume?
For ownership, but this franchise agreement would allow them to do several different type of communication utilities. Phone lines, not that those are going in on a regular basis, but also any federal, state mandated fiber or high-speed
Okay.
internet.
So the fiber, the amplifiers, all of that? Because I know that, and you said something about Comcast, Xfinity, also they work with them,
They do.
their
Yep.
equipment?
They do work with them, and typically where I've seen them is they will be an installer for the Xfinity, the Comcast,
Okay,
yep, and a third party. But I believe the franchise, they may own some of these fiber, but typically where I've seen them is they're a third party installer.
okay. So they're in partnership with
Correct.
Comcast? Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Cedar? Did you want to speak to your second? Councilmember Whalen, did I see your hand up?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to comment on the fact that they've done very good work with the city of Milton. This is a contract with them to do the work when the work occurs. I mean, there's no big, long list of work that we have. You probably have some, but they've done very well. And I don't see a problem with having them continue.
I see another hand. Councilmember Strader?
Do you have any indication where they're going to put those fiber optics, whether underground or are they planning on putting them on utility poles? Do you know?
So there is a section in here that spells out that they can place poles, but it restricts them from installing new poles.
Yeah, I
And
saw that. But I
right, and what I have seen, the trend as of late is everything underground.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Did they give you any indication when they were going to start doing that at all, or their plans in the future, anything?
I just continuously, they're always working within the city. And so what this would do is it would update our previous ordinance and renew that franchise agreement.
Okay, thank you.
This is an action item. Are there any comments? Jacqueline Whalen?
Jacqueline Whalen, Milton, Washington. Just a brief question. I noticed, and I just skimmed through, and didn't see any references to recently created municipal code 12.05 for utilities facilities. When the wireless communication facilities document came forward, there was another document that was 12.05. And I got the impression saying that's the franchise agreement that's now standard. And I missed anything that tied what's before you now to the newly created municipal code 12.05. So if there could be a little discussion about that, I could have misunderstood what the intent was, but it just seems to be because someone asked the question, well, we have franchise agreements with all these people, but the attorneys said, no, you have to have something in municipal code regarding your agreements. So that the nature of the question stems from attorneys' comments, and perhaps I misunderstood what was trying to be created by creating 12.05. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the audience? Director Madden or Planning Manager Stolnecker, do you need a minute to?
I will need to come back and bring that back as far as whether legal believes that we need to reference 12.05 within this franchise agreement. Or not. Yes, legal has reviewed it and they did not say that that was a requirement.
And it does point out that cable and
Cable television permits, this is section B under purpose of the document that you just handed me, Mrs. Whalen. Cable television permits and franchises are separately regulated under federal law. Is that what you're referring to?
yeah. So the franchise that we did was for wireless and utilities. I don't know that it covers that, but we can verify that. I know certain ones they said were covered by federal law, and I know Comcast is covered by federal law, not ours.
Okay, so do you think it needs to be referenced in the franchise agreement, or?
I would like to ask legal for a stance on that.
Okay.
And then bring it back either through the consent agenda or I can present again in February.
Do you have a thought, or Councilmember Peretti?
No.
No, okay. Councilmember Cedar?
Yeah, I'd like to, Mayor, I'd like to move to postpone the pending motion until our next regular meeting.
Okay.
Second it?
So it's been moved by Councilmember Cedar and seconded by Councilmember Peretti to move ordinance 2081-24 to the next regular meeting, which is February 4th. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried 7-0. Quick question for council. If the franchise agreement is fine as it exists and we don't need to add any verbiage, are you okay with us putting it in the consent agenda? Or is there other things you'd like to discuss on that item? Councilmember Cedar?
I'd prefer to not have it in the consent agenda.
Okay, perfect. Anyone else have an opinion? Okay. So moving on to our next item this evening. It is on page 209 of our packet. It is for evidence software. It is resolution 24, no, I'm on the wrong one. My apologies. I jumped ahead here. Okay, so let's start that over. So the next item is 7D on page 165 of your packet. It is for evidence software approval. And I will turn the floor over to Chief Hernandez, and then following his review, we will need a motion to open up the floor.
Good evening, council, distinguished guests. Before you, you have agenda item 7D. It's requesting permission to enter into an agreement with Axon for Evidence.com. I have Sergeant Champagne, who's in charge of evidence collection and storage here tonight, who can give you a little bit more detail why this is necessary. Sergeant Champagne, if you'd like to step up to the podium.
I've never done this before, so just go over it.
Just explain to him why we need it.
Okay. Evidence.com, it's a cloud-based evidence system for digital storage. So currently the department uses, it's like a drive through our network that we're sending to a hard drive somewhere, and that's where we store everything. The problem with that, well, it could be a potential problem, is it's accessible by all staff. Like you can keep dropping things in there. And it's, with Evidence.com being a cloud-based service, it's secure and it's CJIS compliant, which is it's required that we have a CJIS compliant. If we're going to do anything digital, it has to be CJIS compliant. And then it eliminates the need for physical evidence, which can become damaged over time. So if you ever had a USB drive go corrupt on you, you can lose your evidence. Everything would be on the cloud, and it's Microsoft Azure cloud, so it's a very secure cloud system. And just want to go over one more thing. It does other things for the community that we currently can't do. So you can provide a link. So if you have anything like camera footage or a cell phone, or it's very hard sometimes to get that from people. Sometimes they just won't send it or forget, or we have a hard time getting it. We can send them a link and they can upload it directly. So it helps us not miss out on a lot of evidence that we currently miss out on sometimes. And then if, in the future, if we ever were to move towards body cameras, Axon is one of the big players of that, and then this would be a required agreement at that time anyway. That's everything I can think of at the moment.
Questions from council?
I do need a motion to open up the floor. Councilmember Peretti?
I move to approve the agreement between Axon Enterprise Incorporated and the City of Milton for a 5-year contract allowing the use of Evidence.com for storage of all case files and attachments, and authorize the mayor to sign all documents necessary to execute this agreement.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Peretti and seconded by Councilmember Hall to approve the agreement between Axon Enterprise, Inc. and the City of Milton for a 5-year contract allowing the use of Evidence.com for storage of all case files and attachments, and authorize the mayor to sign all documents necessary to execute this agreement. Councilmember Peretti?
I thank you for bringing this forward and actually doing it. I feel like you're getting a little bit more into the 21st century when it comes to storing evidence. I had an opportunity to look at Evidence.com and actually their portfolio and what they do, and I'm very pleased with it. I'm glad we're moving this direction.
Councilmember Hall?
Yeah, I think anything to streamline your evidence is going to be a benefit to the police department and to the community. So, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Councilmember Strader?
So I assume that there are other agencies using this system. Can you name a few?
Yeah, King County Sheriff's Department uses it, Seattle, Lakewood, Algona. And pretty much anybody with Axon cameras has to have this system.
Okay. Oh, I'm leery of putting anything in the cloud. I think it just adds another layer of vulnerability. And my question is, what are the other agencies that are not using this company? What are they using?
There was another company I looked at called NICE. That's what Pierce County Sheriff's are using right now, but that one's $73,000 a year. So it's far more expensive than what we were looking at.
Okay, thank you. How about Puyallup?
Puyallup, I'm not sure. I'd have to check.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. Yeah, I like that you're moving into the 21st century, that you're actually, the way you explained how the evidence is kept now, that made me think, yeah, you need something like this. It's because this will be encrypted, correct? And it said encrypted on transmission and retrieval?
Both ways, yes.
Okay. And extremely hard to be hacked, I would assume. I would hope so.
Yeah, I asked that question, and it is encrypted when you send it. It's encrypted on the actual cloud itself, and it's supposed to be really secure. That's the
Okay.
big thing.
Thank you.
This is an action item. Are there comments from the audience? Jacqueline Whalen?
Jacqueline Whalen, Milton, Washington. Just a few questions, if there could be further discussion, please, on why this company was chosen over others. Another thing would be if Milton changes evidence storage with a different vendor, is the information at Axon transferable? I mean, I just think about how will this work for the future? And I too have concerns about the cloud and security and encryption. I just think to blindly trust it can kind of lower your thinking, but I can appreciate the city's efforts to try to be as protective of accurate, unadulterated evidence to build a solid case. But I just would love to hear more about why this company. Are they only players in town? Is it strictly a money thing? I've learned sometimes you get better when you do pay more. So being that this is such a foreign field to my experience, these are the kind of questions in my head. Thank you.
Jackie, did I see your hand? Yeah, Jackie Strader.
Jackie Streeter, 13th Avenue. I can just, if you want a testimonial of someone who had to supply evidence, it was very cumbersome to do it with the thumb drive. I had to download the evidence off our security system, find a thumb drive, and then the officer had to wait. I had to give it to them, and I kept thinking, there has to be a way to do this online, where I could just upload it. So I appreciate the uploading.
You want Sergeant Champagne?
Yep.
Go ahead and speak to the questions.
I remember one, but what were both the questions again? I'm sorry.
Why we chose this. You hit on it briefly, but I guess if you could repeat it and maybe expand a little bit on why we chose Axon.
Axon's just a leader in this kind of field. I've used them before, so I was familiar with them. And when I did look at the other one, like I said, NICE was the competitor that I was looking at because it was in our area, Pierce County. It does the same thing, but it costs a lot more. And then there was also even though we're not there yet, if we do have tasers, which is an Axon company, and then if we were to go with cameras and we went that direction, we would also use Axon. I'm not saying we're going to use Axon if we get cameras, but if we used Axon cameras, which is the ones that are widely used, you would have to have evidence.com. So if we went with a company such as NICE, and then we wanted to get cameras, we would then have to take all the data from them and then put it in evidence.com. And the second question she had about our data, I asked that as well. It's also in the agreement. If we were to not continue this contract, they will allow us to pull our data and put wherever we're going to put it, wherever we decide to put it, they will allow us to pull it out. We won't just lose it.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Councilmember Cedar?
I just wanted to address that because I think those are some good questions. I see that in the contract about post-termination assistance, that they'll provide that, so that way we can be sure that the data occurs and exists in perpetuity. Kind of giving a different side to Ms. Strader's comments, as a criminal defense attorney, I can say that I have worked with Axon, and it cuts off a lot of avenues that may otherwise exist for challenging evidence. And in my experience, actually working as the Attorney General and as a criminal defense attorney, Axon has, that cloud-based solution is good for getting evidence and for just protecting in general. So I like that company. I like the tie into body cams if we ever go that way. I appreciate you doing some shopping around and deciding to go with this. So I'm comfortable with that.
All right. So it has been moved by Councilmember Peretti and seconded by Councilmember Hall to approve the agreement between Axon Enterprise, Inc. and the City of Milton for a 5-year contract allowing the use of evidence.com for storage of all case files and attachments, and authorize the mayor to sign all documents necessary to execute this agreement. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried 7-0. Thank you, Sergeant Champagne, for presenting this evening. Okay, last item this evening is on page 209 of your packet. It is Resolution 24-965. It is a surplus of police vehicles. I will turn the floor over to Chief Hernandez, and then following his review, I'll need a motion to open up the floor for discussion.
Good evening, council and guests. Agenda 7E is the recommendation for surplusing of vehicles. And you can see it, the age of the vehicles is consistent with our amortization schedule of 5 years. And we're past due on some of these. And again, previous councils, not everybody was here, but some were here when we made decisions to follow an amortization schedule. And that was where we agreed that when a vehicle's maintenance costs exceed the value or market value of the vehicle, that we were going to replace those vehicles. And in keeping in mind that police vehicles are not the same as personal vehicles or even public works vehicles, in the sense that they are emergency response vehicles that operate at very challenging conditions, whether it be speed or driving conditions. And so this is consistent, and my recommendation is that council accept the surplus of these vehicles that have been presented as is, and that we authorize the mayor and myself to go ahead and dispose of these vehicles.
Councilmember Whalen?
If there's no other question, discussion, I'm going to make a motion for this.
Make a motion first, thank you.
And also, I think we need to add a little time when we're done with this. Move to approve Resolution 24-1965, declaring obsolete police equipment to be surplus and authorize the disposal of same.
Second.
I think I heard Hall first. It's been moved by Councilmember Whalen and seconded by Councilmember Hall to approve Resolution 24-1965, declaring obsolete police equipment to be surplus and authorize the disposal of same. Councilmember Whalen, did you want to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. This will open up some parking space in your parking over here. And again, it's just, if it's just his time and you agree with it and you understand everything that's taken place with them, I support those decisions.
Okay. Councilmember Hall?
Yeah, I've driven some of those vehicles, and they need to leave. That's all I'm going to say.
Any other comments from council? Mayor Pro Tem, and then
Thank you.
Councilmember Strader.
I was on council when we agreed on this amortization schedule, and I'm actually glad to see that it's being used. And I'm in full agreement with this, and that's all I have.
Councilmember Strader?
Hey, Chief, can we find out, do you have approximate mileage on these vehicles? Just a ballpark, what are we looking at on these vehicles? How many miles are we getting out of them?
Anecdotally, from the time that I've been here, it seems to be between 60 and 90,000 miles. And again, it's the type of driving. Driving in the city is harder than driving, like when I was a county. We got more miles, like in the county, it was 120,000 miles versus here, just because of all the stopping, going, standing, all that. They seem to wear out faster.
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions, Councilmember Hall?
I have one more question. Is it based also on how many accidents it's been in?
How the asset
Well,
has what?
How many accidents the car's been in? I mean, do you
Yes.
take that into account? Because sometimes they kind of get a little creaky, rickety.
We do take it into account, and we do pay full coverage through our self-insured WCIA co-op. And so when we have a vehicle that they say it's cheaper to buy a new one than to fix it and then continue to maintenance, we do that. And that was one of the questions we had in the previous council meeting was, why so many vehicles? Well, one of them was an accident vehicle because we were scheduled to replace 3 vehicles, and we ended up with 2 additional vehicles. And one of them was the grant vehicle, one was a accident vehicle. And then also sometimes we come across some good deals where we can get, replace a vehicle that should be replaced, which was a detective rig again. But yes, sometimes to answer your question circuitously, that we do end up having vehicle accidents and they go sooner than later, but then we still bring it to council to authorize the purchase of the vehicle.
Thank you.
Yeah. Would you make a motion? Just like 15 minutes?
Sorry to interject here. I make a motion to add 10 minutes to council's schedule tonight.
Can I get a second?
Second.
So it's been moved by Councilmember Cedar, seconded by Councilmember Strader to extend our meeting to 9:10. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried 7-0. Are there any other questions on the surplus of these vehicles? Okay, it is an action item. Are there any questions or comments from the audience? Okay. It has been moved by Councilmember Whalen and seconded by Councilmember Hall to approve Resolution 24-1965, declaring obsolete police equipment to be surplus and authorize the disposal of same. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried 7-0. Moving on to council reports. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I love these in-depth discussions that we get to have in these. We didn't really debate, but and input from the citizens is always helpful. And it's nice when it happens and actually wisdom comes out of that, and then you either, postpone a motion or move it back until a later date to get more information. So that's the way the system should work. Getting input from as many different places as you can, because not everybody's an expert in everything.
Councilmember White?
Yeah, I don't have much. I just happened to notice that there's a lot of vehicles being parked on the sidewalk on Fifth Avenue. I'm wondering if that's, number one, going to be allowed, and if not, how the homeowners are going to be communicated that message.
They have all been communicated to. It is not allowed, and we have started ticketing.
Okay. There were still many last night, so.
Okay. So we'll just increase enforcement.
And luckily,
Or patrolling.
Sergeant Champagne is here because he's our parking sergeant.
Thanks.
Councilmember Peretti?
Just one thing, I really appreciate Public Works and their de-icing that's going on. They are out there. I've had comments from others that don't live here that have driven through and they go, man, your city's de-iced all the time. And it's actually really nice. I mean, it really is nice that that's happening, so I really appreciate that. So kudos to them if you can let them know.
Councilmember Cedar?
Thanks. Just one complaint from my children about the de-icing. Great work all around. Nothing else.
Councilmember Strader?
Nothing at this time.
Councilmember Hall?
Another kudos for Public Works. We had a leak down on 11th and Emerald, and they literally were there for about an hour and 20 minutes, and they had it taken care of. The guys were soaking wet and cold, but they still had a smile on their face and were happy that they had got that taken care of so quickly. And we appreciated the effort. Yeah.
Great. Councilmember Whalen? Oh, no, go ahead.
One thing. Some comments on racing in Fife, and it's heard up here in Milton, very loud as,
I don't know if there's much, I got that comment.
I know you did.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll talk to Fife, but I just don't know if there's much we can do about their racing.
We can try to stop them until they decide not to stop.
But I mean, it's down in Fife,
Right.
but it's the sounds coming up the hill. It's kind of like fireworks on the reservation. They just
Exactly.
come up.
exactly.
But I will talk to Mayor Roscoe and see if there's anything we can do.
Thank you.
Councilmember Whalen?
Thank you, Mayor. Just one quick question going back onto the sign code. There are occasions when the school likes to use the park and the front of their property and the right-of-way for many, many, many repeating signs. It's usually an event that takes place. I don't know if we have anything in the code that would prohibit it in the new code or not, or what considerations we should take, if any. That's the first one. Slavic Baptist Church has 4 new utility poles on the ground. Is this an opportunity for us to also, we've asked for consideration of lighting along Taylor? Is it a time that, are we doing the work? Are they doing the contracting work, or is it contractor?
Yeah, those utility poles are required. They have to step back the existing utilities approximately 20 feet to accommodate the new frontage improvements. And it is an opportunity always to install new lighting.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was a good time to work with them or not, or if you were doing anything in that regard, but thank you. And I've got to make one comment about improvement in the audio system. These acoustic panels seem to be working different, and I like it, but I still have to ask the people, please, I'm trying to remember to do this also, where when you turn your head to the side and so forth, I lose it. I lose you too. So just a thought, but the acoustics is much better. Thank you.
Moving on, director reports. Director Simpson, did you have anything you wanted to add? Okay. Director
Nothing more.
You're talked out tonight. Chief,
Start with the bad and go with the good in the end. So
you've got 2 minutes.
shootings are happening. Stolen cars are being stolen that are warming up in the morning. So I say it every winter. If you're going to warm your car up, you better have it locked. And even if you have it locked, it should be, when it drives away, it's disabled. If it's not, there are people just driving around looking for cars that are warming up and they're stealing them. Crime continues. Have your head on a swivel. We have the good stuff. Officer candidate is in backgrounds, and so I'll hopefully have those results in 2 to 3 weeks. The awards were given at the employee recognition lunch, and look for those awards to be in the Milton newsletter that comes out, where we recognize life-saving, Officer of the Year, Partner of the Year with some detail. And our baseball cards, I expect them to be here any day. And we're going to also have pictures of all the officers in the foyer in the next 2 weeks.
Awesome. Okay, I'll be quick so we don't go over. Bridge tour, I sent an email out. If you have not responded and you want to go on the bridge tour, please let us know. Sound panels, I'm glad you recognize the change. I do want to thank Councilmember Peretti, who built them, my mom Sylvia, who actually wrapped them for us. They both volunteered their time and efforts, and then our crews put them up, saving us thousands of dollars. This is a quick session down in Olympia. It's 60 days, so we really have to pay attention because it's fast. Every Friday, AWC offers city action calls, which I would encourage all of you to sign up for. It's a 45-minute phone call. You can turn your camera off and just listen if you're busy, but they go over the highlights of that week, and it's just really important to stay connected. One of the ones that I'm supporting is Senate Bill 5959, which is some regulation on traffic cameras. It would allow us to have non-commissioned officers and/or trained public employees view the tickets. And we're saving the cost of not having to have a commissioned officer. So Chief and I both are supporters of that bill. There is one on, and I didn't write it down, but lifting the arbitrary 1% cap to 3%. And then just a couple more. I'll send out the sidewalk one or the no parking requirement one that they're coming through. And then just really quick, we have 1 more minute. I just want to announce that the winners of the 2023 Santa Parade float is probably no surprise that it's City Council and the Grinch float. So thank you, Councilmember Hall and Councilmember Cedar and Councilmember Peretti for your efforts on that. And so seeing that all items have been concluded, I will adjourn this meeting at 9:10 p.m.